Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, black talk.
Both of your daughters have been great champions here. You're clearly very proud. In recent times, things haven't gone so well. What are you saying to them, Richard, about the way they're playing at the moment? Give me an insight, if you would.
I would teach my girls, and even when Serena lost the other day, is make sure you don't lose confidence. Confidence is the most important thing in the world. Once it's lost, you've lost your life. And I always let them know that tennis will never be number one in our life. It never has been, and it never will be.
What is the number one thing in their lives at the moment, then? If it's not the number one thing, what is?
Jehovah God is the number one thing. The second thing is family. The third thing is your education. The fourth is your business. And the fifth thing, more than anything, is always feel good about yourself. If you do that, you have it made.
Tell me, they've both won so much in tennis. They've been great champions. Do they still have the desire to go out there and do it still at the top level, do you think?
I don't know. I'm going to ask John McEnroe that. What do you think, Mac? So I guess so. I hope they do. Yeah. They came a long ways over here, so I believe that they come here believing that they can win.
Do you believe that they can make it back to the top and win Grand Slam tournaments again? Obviously, you guided their career for so long. Do you believe that they can win Grand Slam tournaments again?
Yes, I definitely believe it. I know they will. When you have the kind of speed that Venus and Serena have, it's hard to beat anyone with speed. Now, Serena might have to get in a lot better condition, because like I've been talking to her about getting in condition.
Have you? Do you feel she's not in condition?
I feel like Serena's in worse condition I am.
You think she's in the worst condition ever?
I think she's in my condition, and that's only to move a half a foot.
Why is she in that condition, then?
Well, I'd have to ask her. I've been preaching to her to get in condition. But once Serena's in condition, and Venus, it's kind of hard to beat us because we get to end of all.
Is Serena not training then? Is that what you're saying?
Serena actually has been hurt a lot.
She's had the injury,
yes.
But she is back playing and she's played at Wimbledon. But do you feel that she's maybe not making the effort that she should?
I think she's making a great effort. I was suggesting to Serena not to come to Wimbledon this year because she came on a sprained ankle and a left knee that was hurting. She believed that she could win even on that. So when they get back, sure they get back because of the courage, the confidence, and the responsibility that they have to what they wish to do.
Do you think your daughters love tennis as much as they did?
I would say no.
Why is that?
Because they understand now they're older, that there's a lot more to life that I've been talking to them about from a young age than just tennis. I see too many tennis players today that don't have no place to go. Matter of fact, I know a professional player now working at a hamburger stand, and I took them to see that. When they see that, they understand even more so at this age what I was talking about when they was at a younger age. So
if they're not so in love with the game, what makes them continue?
I think it's the fight. You find every now and then you find people that love to fight, and in America we always come up with a fighter. One of the greatest fighters we ever had was Mr. McEnroe, Mr. Connors, Venus and Serena. They all are fighters, so they love to compete.
But they still want to do it, because I spoke to Venus and I interviewed her yesterday, and she didn't seem that forthcoming. She didn't seem that happy, and I just wondered whether even Venus was thinking, well, I've done it, I've achieved a great deal. There are easier ways to perhaps make money for her these days. What would you say to that?
Well, I work for her, and I don't want to be out of job saying the wrong thing, so I would say, keep it up, Miss Venus. Never let tennis be number one.
But you think she will?
Oh, yes, without a doubt. She'll definitely be number one again. And she'll win tournaments again. And it's a great possibility she'll win this tournament right here.
You believe that,
this year? Yes, I do believe that.
Context of White Supremacy. Justice Gus T Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of racism, white supremacy. Today's date is Friday, September 19th, 2014, so I have been told. This is our second study session on Mr. Richard Williams, Black and White, The Way I See It. Fantastic book, very excited, looking forward to diving in. Got lots of constructive feedback from the folks who participated last week or listened to the archives or what have you. Seems a lot of folks, and myself included, are very much looking forward to this week's installment. Invest if you think the program is constructive, listener supported, counter racist radio. Check the blog racism-notes.blogspot.com. racism-notes.blogspot.com. PayPal is in the top right corner. If you are not comfortable with PayPal, drop me an email. We can get you a mailing address. If you would be more comfortable with the latter with regards to investing, supporting the broadcast. Again, listener supported, counter racist radio. That said, we will be picking up this week on Chapter 5, and we're right at the end of Chapter 5, regardless if you have the electronic version or if you have a hardback copy. If you go to the end of Chapter 5, just a few pages before the chapter concludes, there's a break in the body of the text in the narrative where he says, always test your theories, break. And then it continues on to the rest of Chapter 5. That's where we're picking up at that break in Chapter 5, where we're starting out this week. Man, so much. Kind of pay attention with all of what's been in the news for about the last 7 days about Adrian Peterson, black male accused of beating his child. That is going to come up in this week's text as well. Keep an eye out for that. We also are paying attention to the role of white Jesus, Christianity. I think that's something to keep an eye on as well. But just, man, phenomenal section of reading this week. Very excited, very much looking forward to hopping right into it. Without further ado, Mr. Richard Williams, Black and White, The Way I See It, Context of White Supremacy. And I got shot at quite a few times till I learned that my best bet was to stay far away from people I was not going to call Mr. or Mrs. Test your theories. You will live longer. I perfected my plans and my running, and the next fight I got in, to escape from the white guys who were after me, I ran from downtown Shreveport to my house, maybe 6 miles away. The running part didn't bother me. I could now run 15 miles or more easily, but I knew I'd have a problem ducking and dodging them this near to my house and, in the end, maybe lead them to where my family lived. I veered off into the forest. At that moment, you would have seen me grinning. It wasn't me who had a problem. Now they had the problem. I had a lot of hate in me those days. No matter what Mama said or what I was taught in school or church, I felt I was doing the right thing to fight back, to fight any way I could. By now, I could see the forest trees and hear the branches swept by the wind. I was the happiest human being in the world because I knew they were in deep trouble. They sure were. Once I got into the woods, I led them into the dry undergrowth. With the wind blowing and them chasing, I set the woods on fire. I knew all the ways out, but they didn't. I didn't care. If they'd gotten trapped in there, I would have been happy. They weren't going to take a bottle to my head or catch and beat me, not if they were running from being burned alive. I think those people got out of the woods, but I left before I found out. When I got home, I sure couldn't tell Mom what I did because she had already told me how she felt about my anger at white people. It just would have convinced her I was going to hell for sure. Unfortunately, subsequent events did convince her. We were living on East 77th Street in the Cedar Grove section. To cross 77th at Fairfield Avenue, you had to walk past houses where white people lived. Lots of them had dogs, and if you walked past on the street, the owners turned the dogs loose to bite you. Sometimes they'd wait for a black woman or child to pass, then release the dogs from houses in front and behind so there was no place to run when they charged. They caught me good that day, walking down the street. Maybe I should have tried to run, but I was suddenly in between 4 or 5 dogs, barking and nipping at me and wanting to bite the living hell out of me. For all my theories, even as fast as I wasn't going to outrun them. I had to stand my ground. I pulled out my slingshot and hit 1 or 2, and that backed them up for a moment. With nowhere to hide, I leaped up onto the front porch and crashed in through the front door. In those days, white people kept their guns in trophy cases or over the fireplace. I knew this because I had broken into lots of houses to steal things. Could I have gotten out the back and escaped? Maybe. But I had too much rage, too much fury to back down. My blood was hot, my heart was pumping, and the one thing I knew for sure was that I had not done a damn thing to deserve being bitten by dogs. I found a .22 caliber rifle and a .410 shotgun, both loaded. The dogs were still barking and snarling outside. I went through the front door and started shooting. I laid 2 dogs to rest, squealing, and I was just as ready to kill the others. They were coon dogs. They didn't have sense enough to back off. I hit one with the .22 and he went down. The only reason I didn't kill them all was a black lady named Sugar Dew, who lived near the corner of Fairfield, saw the commotion and yelled at me, "Child, I'm gonna tell your mama." I threw the guns down and ran off. I hid for a while. The owners of the dogs called the police, but by that time, the local officer, Dale Baker, wouldn't come get me. He thought I was a crazy nigger, and I would just as soon kill him if he tried to take me to jail. That was more and more my attitude. The older I got, the more I was starting to live to die. I was like a lot of the black kids in gangs I saw years later when I lived in Compton. When my mother found out what I'd done to the dogs, she shook her head sadly and told me, "You think those people are prejudiced? Richard, you just a kid, but you the most prejudiced human being I ever met." She walked away, shaking her head. "Sonny, you got more hatred in you than any child I've ever seen." I wanted to talk back and say, "Mama, what would you have done?" But I couldn't talk back to her. Besides, I knew the answer. She would have accepted it. That did not make sense to me then, and it still doesn't. But I got what she was trying to teach me. Avoid things and you don't have a problem. The way to survive was to live a life of evasion. You didn't get into conflict. You didn't pass by the White House where you knew dogs lived. You kept to your own. You backed down. You were subservient. That was what she desired for me, but I just could never be that way. See, all I could think of was what would have happened if Mama or my sisters had been walking past those houses when the white people set their dogs on them. It made me smile. The dogs wouldn't bother them now. Chapter 6. When it came to school, Mama started me out right. I learned my numbers and ABCs before I ever went. When I was very young, she would say a letter, then make me repeat it. Sometimes I would have to stand in our front room for over an hour saying the ABCs. At 2, it was not easy to hold my attention. "Be still, Richard, and say your letters," Mama chided. By the time I was 4, my mom would say the letter, and I had to point to an object that began with the same letter. If I didn't match the letter to the right object, Mama would hit my legs with a switch till they were on fire. I'd fidget from the pain. Boy, be still and listen. You got to learn to listen if you want to get anywhere in this world. Do you hear me, son? Yes, ma'am. You got to learn so you can teach your sisters. I don't want no ignorant children. Yes, ma'am. Mama was a great woman, and her smile lit up the room. An optimist, she always had something positive to say about people. She was kind-hearted and loving and would do anything to help anyone. She used to say, I don't know nothing bad about nobody. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Ain't no need for me to be selfish with people who in need, 'cause whatever I got, God gave me that. Mama did not have any college degrees, but she had a PhD in the psychology of life. Rarely giving me a direct answer to a question, she preferred to make me think things through on my own. Today, parents do everything for their kids. Ask a question, get an answer. Look how smart Daddy and Mama are. My mama wanted me to discover reason and understanding on my own. She had an unyielding determination that all of her children would be able to confront life on their own terms. I can't say Mama had specific aspirations for me. Being a lawyer or a businessman was an unrealistic dream back then. My mom simply believed that in order to be anything, you had to get an education. She would line us up and take us to the cotton field, and we'd stand there for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, she'd ask, "What y'all see?" Being the oldest, I answered first. "I just see a whole lot of cotton, Mama." "You ain't looking deep enough," she said. "What I see is work that ain't gonna take us nowhere. All I see is aches and pain. All I see is white, the white man's cotton, the white man's land, the white man's house, the white man's money. You get your lesson like I tell you to, and one day you ain't gonna have to work in no cotton field. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am," I said, and I surely did. By the time I was 5, Mama had taught me the ABCs, numbers, colors, and how to write my name. After years of looking over her shoulder while she read the Bible, I was also a very good reader. We always read the Bible. It was the only book we had because Negroes weren't allowed to go to the library and check out books. There was no kindergarten in those days, so I started school in the 1st grade. The name of the school was Little Hope, located on 73rd and Line Avenue. The name was absolutely correct. Negroes had little hope there. With its ancient wooden frame and tin roof, Little Hope was just like the rundown row houses of our neighborhood. The school couldn't afford a flagpole, so there was just a tired old American flag nailed to a long stick that was bolted to the tin roof. The other kids were proud to see the flag waving in the wind. I wondered how they could embrace such foolishness. Why did we clothe ourselves in the flag of patriotism and celebrate democracy when the chains of hatred and segregation bound us? Why did we put our faith in a world that was clearly out to kill us? Failing to see what others saw in the flag, I came up with my own color scheme. Red, white, and blue painted a sordid picture. White represented evil intent and racial superiority. Red represented the shedding of innocent blood. Blue represented the senseless murders of my people. The truth could not be hidden behind a colorful rainbow. Robbed of our heritage, we had no identity. We were just niggers, unlearned, unintelligent, and without hope. Our school reflected my color scheme. Most of the windows were broken, with the panes filled in with cardboard. There were no air conditioners or heaters. In the summertime, we sweltered. In the winter, we froze. School started in September, an extremely hot month. To endure the heat, we sat in the playground under a shade tree. One water fountain trickled out a thin stream. Everyone would gather around and drink like thirsty animals, despite the green slime and bird droppings covering it. There was one filthy outdoor bathroom. It was common to find maggots on the floor. It was totally unsanitary. There was no place to wash our hands or faces after we came in from the playground where we ate too. Without a cafeteria, we all brought lunch. Mine was most often a piece of leftover cornbread. I forget it was in my pocket, so it usually turned into crumbs. The only saving grace was a one-room shack we called the Nickel Lady's House. Across from the schoolyard on Line Avenue were kids who were fortunate enough to have a nickel or a dime could buy snacks. Unlike the kids of today, no one made a fashion statement at my school. Boys wore dry-rotted shirts and pants with holes in the knees. Girls' hems hung from under their dresses. I never worried about being outdressed by the other kids. We all wore the same clothes every day and were all just as poor. No one had athletic shoes. We wore our Sunday go-to meeting shoes, the only ones we had. When we took them off to play, piles of patent leather shoes and work boots sat in the dirt in the middle of the playground. Shoes were the most difficult article of clothing to keep in good repair because we kept outgrowing them and were too poor to buy new ones. Kids came to school with holes in their shoes or no shoes at all. When I didn't have any more shoes, I decided to make me a pair. I looked through the trash and found a pair of matching soles. I poked holes around the edges of each and ran fishing wire through the holes, knotting the ends so they couldn't come out. Wrapping rags around my feet for socks, I stepped on top of the soles and pulled the fishing wire together over them. I twisted the wires together with pliers until the soles stayed on my feet when I walked. It was a creative but painful experience. All the kids admired my fancy shoes when I went to school, but as the day went on, the fishing wire slowly cut into me. Stubborn as ever, I refused to take off my new shoes. By the time I got home, my feet were swollen and bloody. The next day, I was back to barefoot. My first grade teacher's name was Mrs. Williams, no relation to me, a small, fragile woman who looked too old to be working. There were more than 40 children in our class from 6 to 14. Mrs. Williams didn't have a roll book, so she scribbled our names in the back of her Bible. I was surprised she didn't run out of room to write. Mrs. Williams was a dedicated teacher and made the best of things. We were too poor to buy school supplies, so she brought pencils, tablets, and bags of rocks from home. There were no desks, so we sat on old wooden chairs and held our tablets in our laps. We didn't have books, so she wrote our lessons on the chalkboard and divided the class into two groups. One group worked on counting using the rocks. The other copied lessons from the board. Mrs. Williams made a lasting impression on me. Married to a preacher, she insisted we start each day with a prayer. Her prayers were so strong, I felt like God Himself was present in the room. I behaved because I feared she would send the Holy Ghost after me. On the other hand, the principal, Mr. Green, was a stumbling drunk who did nothing to fix the school's rundown condition. I hated how his breath smelled of alcohol whenever he walked by and patted me on my back. I used to see him behind the school drinking from a bottle in a brown bag. I also saw him passed out in an alley one weekend, only to reappear at school Monday morning in a badly wrinkled suit, his tired red eyes indicating his habit. My fondest memory of first grade was meeting my best friend, Chili Bowl. He was just as poor as I was and wore the same pair of overalls and suspenders every day, just like me. He never brought lunch or had any money, so we shared what I had. He had an infectious smile and loved to play, but what fascinated me most about Chili Bowl was his thirst for learning. He was always trying to find a book to read to make himself smarter. One day I asked him, "Chili Bowl, why are you always looking for something to read?" "So I can get a good job when I grow up," he answered. "My hands hurt when I pick cotton with my mama in the field." Chili Bowl was 8 years old, the oldest of 7 children. He was 2 years older than I was, but in the same first grade as me because he started late. His mother was always pregnant with another baby. People called his 6 brothers and sisters sidesteppers because of their ages: 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Chili Bowl was in the same boat as me. He didn't have a father. Curious about how his family worked, I walked Chili Bowl home one time. His house looked all raggedy and spooky, so I asked, "Chili Bowl, do you see haints at night?" A haint was what we called a ghost or spirit. "Ain't no haints in my house," he spat angrily. I wasn't so sure. The front yard was all scraggly weeds. In back, drying wash danced on the clothesline as a small black dog jumped and barked underneath, trying to snatch things. Nevertheless, a delicious smell flowed out the back door and caught my nose. Chili Bowl's mother was cooking. She was young but looked very tired and came out as we climbed the rickety stairs. She said, "Richard, your mama know you over here?" "Yes, ma'am," I replied. "Okay, but make sure you get your butt home before dark," she warned. I nodded firmly. Believe me, the presence of haints assured it. Once, Chili Bowl told me he was spanked because he broke a spoon. He had been digging holes in the yard and the spoon bent and broke. His mother slapped him upside his head and said, "I ain't got no money to buy no spoon. What we gonna eat with?" He told me they had 1 spoon, 1 fork, and 1 knife. The family shared them at dinner time. Sometimes he had to eat with his hands. I wondered how they made it. The bedroom he shared with sisters and brothers didn't have any furniture. The only thing in the room was a sheet filled with cotton. They used it as a mattress. I had thought my family was surely the poorest family on our street, the poorest in the Cedar Grove community where we lived, and without a doubt the poorest in Shreveport. It came as a surprise to me that we weren't actually the poorest family in town. At least we had forks and knives when we ate. School was tough for me until I met Chili Bowl. Before he was there to protect me, I got into lots of fights. The older kids picked on me, especially about the size of my nose. I hated it. Chili Bowl made school much better. He protected me. My enemies were his enemies. He was so tough, even the older kids didn't pick on me when Chili Bowl was around. It was a nice feeling. After school, Chili Bowl and I would lie in the yard with our hands behind our heads, gazing toward the sky with twigs hanging from our mouths. A manly pose. We talked about all the things we wanted to do when we grow up. I want to move away from here one day, Chili said seriously. I'm going to get me a good job, a fancy car, a big house, and have lots of money. I ain't going to be picking no cotton for nobody. I'm going to make something out of myself. Richard, you watch and see. Out of the blue, I asked, you think God hears us when we pray? Chili Bowl hesitated. My mama said he'll answer all of our prayers, but so far, he ain't answered none of mine. We still poor. I laughed and got up and yelled at the sky. God, do you hear us down here? I picked up a stick and started banging on an empty can from the garbage, yelling at the top of my lungs. God, are you up? God, God, are you up? Chili Bowl scowled. What you doing that for? Laughing, I answered, I'm trying to wake God up. He must be sleeping, 'cause he ain't answered none of my prayers either. Chili Bowl and I had a lot in common. We both had nothing. To make some money, Chili Bowl redeemed empty pop bottles for their 2-cent each deposit. We decided to work together to gather and sell more bottles to save enough money to start a business, even though we had no idea how to start one. Our plan was to sell enough bottles to buy a foot tub to harvest local fruit. Berries and plums were plentiful, and we could pick and sell them. Early the next morning, Chili Bowl rode his bicycle to the candy store on Line Avenue to look for discarded bottles. He packed the bottles neatly in the wire basket on the front of his bicycle. As he crossed the intersection of Line and 73rd, a car slammed into him and just kept on going. Everyone there said that it never even slowed. The squeal of tires and the sound of the impact was heard for blocks. When I heard the neighbors yelling, I ran to see what happened. There was my best friend lying in the street with broken glass all over him and blood flowing from his head. I looked at the crowd around us and asked, "What happened?" Someone said angrily, "A white lady hit Chili Bowl and just kept on going." I knelt next to his body and opened his eyes with my fingers. "Chili Bowl, can you hear me? Get up. Get up." He didn't answer. He just died. My heart felt so heavy. Warm tears streamed down my face. Just when I had found a friend, someone killed him. My anger was made bigger by the fact that the woman who hit him didn't have the decency to stop. She left him in the middle of the street to die like a dog. I ran home as fast as I could. Mama, she killed Chili Bowl. She killed Chili Bowl. A white lady killed him. She hit him with her car. I don't have a friend anymore. Mama placed her arms around me and said, "It'll be okay. Sometimes things happen for the better and work for the good of those that know the Lord." Tears ran down my face. I know the Lord didn't work me no good. "You'll understand it better by and by," my mother said calmly. "By when, Mama?" She had no answer. Life turned gray. I didn't go fishing anymore. School became a horrible place again. Every day brought a new version of Chili Bowl's death. As a joke, some kids lay on the ground and pretended to be dead, saying, "This is how Chili Bowl looked." I had no one at all to talk to laugh with, or to play with at school. The children got meaner and started picking on me again. My savior was gone. Chili Bowl could no longer protect me as he had in the past. The teasing and insults increased. The loneliness grew unbearable. I knew what God was trying to tell me. You are alone. Chapter 7. I became fascinated with stealing at the age of 8. I don't know if the thrill was being able to get away with a crime or that the crime was against the white man. Either way, it was the start of a prosperous career. I used to confiscate, steal, cartons of cookies from the factory in the town that made them and sell them to the smaller markets in the community. I stashed them in the bushes and came back at night for them. I loaded them in my little red wagon and casually strolled down Main Street. It amazed me no one ever questioned how I got those cookies. Negroes often got arrested for hunting animals for food. The police said it was stealing. They called it hunting out of season. Since hunger had no season, it meant those animals had more value than we did. One summer day, I went hunting with my .22 rifle. It went fine. I killed 3 wild ducks and 3 squirrels. My family would have meat to eat that night and some leftover for the next day. I trussed the dead animals with fishing line and attached them with fish hooks to a stick I rested on my shoulder. I walked home through the woods with the bodies dangling behind me, blood soaking the back of my shirt. I was happy and fulfilled. I had done my job as a man and provider. Almost as soon as I stepped onto Main Street, the sheriff's car pulled up alongside me. I hadn't had a run-in with the sheriff before, so I continued to walk. I had done nothing wrong. He pulled the car directly in front of me and jumped out. "Where you going with those animals, boy? You steal them from somebody?" I answered quickly. "No, sir. I killed them in the woods today. My family needs the meat." He raised an eyebrow and stared me down. "My family needs meat too, but I'm gonna have to arrest you for shooting animals out of season. It's against the law, boy. I'm gonna put your black ass in jail." He took the meat and told me to turn around with my hands behind my back so he could handcuff me. As I did, Out of nowhere, a hard object crashed against the back of my head. I fell with the world spinning around me. The sheriff had hit me with his flashlight. He kneeled next to me, flicked open the cylinder of his gun, and showed me the bullets inside. "I've got 6 bullets, nigger, and I'm going to shoot you one for every animal you killed. You got 30 seconds to get your black ass out of here, or I'm going to shoot you dead, boy." I got up with the world a blur and ran as fast as I could. By the time I got home, I was so dizzy and exhausted, I lay down in the shade under the tree and passed out, lying on my stomach. Sometime later, I heard Mama screaming, "They killed my baby! They killed my baby! Those bastards! I'm going to get my shotgun and kill them too." I opened my eyes. "What's wrong, Mama? Are you okay? Did something happen to my sisters?" Mama dropped to my side, shaking. She was so relieved. "I thought you were dead, Richard." "Why?" "'Cause you got blood all over the back of your shirt." I told my mom about going hunting and the blood on my shirt, but before I could tell her the rest, she yelped excitedly, "Thank God! We got meat today. We can eat like kings. I'm going to do some real cooking on that meat, Sonny." I lowered my eyes. "Mama, the sheriff took all the meat and hit me upside my head with his flashlight. He threatened to shoot me 6 times, so I ran." I saw a look on my mama's face I had never seen, a sadness that seemed too deep to measure. "Richard, I love you and your sisters more than anything in this world. But if I had known life would be like this for you children, I'm not sure I would have had none of y'all." I could see the hurt, not just in her eyes, but in her walk. She climbed the steps slowly, head hung low. She had a defeated spirit and a depleted heart. On the last step, she looked back and said, "I thought you was dead. I'm glad you're alive, Richard." So was I. The beating set me back a bit, but I recovered. The sheriff might have taken my kill, but not my ambition, my desire to steal. That grew as fast as I. At 12, I started a produce garden in our backyard to stock a farm stand. Whatever I could not grow, I confiscated, stole from white people. I stole watermelons, peaches, strawberries, blackberries, tomatoes, hickory nuts, and pecans. Pecans were my biggest seller during Christmas. When I was at school, I hired the men who loitered on street corners to work the farm stand for me. I earned $24 a week. Determined to make more, I confiscated cotton at night while the field hands and supervisors slept. Confident, I confiscated cotton 5 to 6 times a year. Occasionally, I killed someone's cow, goat, or pig and sold the meat from a wagon I pulled around the neighborhood. By the time I was 13, my business ventures were profitable enough to move us into a house at 514 East 77th. We put down half the cost of the land up front and agreed to pay the balance 6 months later. School took a back seat because I was too busy trying to make money. Still, I refused to neglect my education. I read books and tried to be a good student, but a new conflict emerged. I fancied myself a fine horn and harmonica player. I also played a mean set of drums. I wanted to be in the school band, but Mr. H, the band director, considered me a troublemaker and refused to let me play. Mr. H was a high yellow Negro who thought his light skin made him better than those of us who were dark complexioned. He didn't see that it didn't matter a damn to white folks. To them, he was still just another nigger. I heard around town you a big thief, he told me. That's a easy way to get killed. I got some good children in my band, and I ain't gonna let you come around and poison they minds. Boy, you the devil. You go round stealing from them white folks. Them people ain't done nothing to you. Why you stealing they stuff? I shrugged. I didn't explain my motives. He wouldn't understand them. I was supposed to accept his word as law, but I couldn't. I found the solution to my problem in my new best friend, a boy named Little Man, who ran with the Cedar Grove gang. Little Man always had a sly look on his face and wasn't afraid of anyone or anything. He also had a reputation for stealing in broad daylight, so I dared him to steal the decoration horn off the top of the Iceman's truck so I could play it in the band. I'll give you 25 cents if you can get it, I promised. Never one to walk away from a challenge, Little Man gave an airy wave. Man, I can steal anything. One time I crawled under Old Man Thomas's fence and stole a pig, and I'm going to do it again, Richard. Old Man Thomas was a white farmer who lived on the outskirts of town. A member of the Ku Klux Klan, Thomas had already killed 2 Negroes who tried to imitate Little Man's success. Little Man boasted, I crawled under the fence and grabbed one of those slimy pigs. It kept squealing, so I hit him on the head with a big rock. Was my mama happy when I got home? She cleaned that pig up and cooked it. We sure enough had some good eating. Sure enough, the next morning when I went to the well to get some water, Little Man was waiting for me on the back porch with my new horn. You got my money, Richard? He asked with a grin. I dug deep into my pocket, pulled out 25 cents, and gave it to him. Little Man smiled easy-like. Let me know if you need me to steal something else. I'll steal it for another quarter. At that moment, I admired everything about him. I don't need nothing else, I said, but thanks a lot. Little Man turned his cap backward, grinned, and walked away. That was the last time I saw him. 3 days later, some boys hunting in the woods found his lifeless body hanging from a tree. Both his hands had been cut off. Rumor had it that Mr. Thomas was having a Ku Klux Klan meeting when Little Man tried to steal another of his pigs. The Klan caught Little Man and decided to make an example out of him. They bound his hands and feet and tied a handkerchief around his mouth. They cut off both his hands with an axe and lynched his shocked body from a tree. Then they hung Little Man's hands on the fence as a warning to other niggers who thought about stealing. There was no formal investigation. No one was ever questioned. Nobody was able to prove who killed Little Man because no one ever tried. For a long time, guilt prevented me from using the horn. Anger won out. Little Man wasn't going to die for nothing. If Mr. H wouldn't let me play with the band officially, I would play with it unofficially. The horn was too old and battered to play, but inside was a small opening into which I inserted a whistle. I stuffed old rags around it to keep it from falling out. It had the strangest sound I'd ever heard. It sounded like a hurt, chirping bird and a crying baby. Whenever the band played, I hid out of sight and blew my man-made horn. Like a screaming banshee, I blew it and blew it. Every time I blew it, I thought about little man. That sound was his sound. That cry was his last on earth. Sometimes anger overrides fear. I had enough anger at that moment that if I'd had a good gun, I might have killed somebody. Instead, I decided to complete what Little Man had started. Not only would I steal the white man's pigs, I'd take an axe and kill them. I would steal their cows, their horses, their wagons, their mules. I would steal anything that wasn't nailed down. And if it was nailed down, I'd find a way to unnail it and take it too. It was my own personal revolution. First, I made old man Thomas pay for killing little man over a goddamn slimy, dirty-ass pig. He had a beautiful black stallion, a prized possession. He loved that horse more than he loved his kids. He used to take it to horse shows, and it always won first place. For days, I snuck into the woods and hid behind a tree and watched him pamper the horse. He kept it in a fenced corral and brushed its coat gently and talked to it like it was human. One night, I went to the corral, let the stallion out, and quietly led it away. I sold it for $50 to a man who said Thomas owed him some money. I would have shot it, but I got more pleasure knowing it was still alive and Thomas couldn't get it back. I stole what he loved most. But that was just another lesson. We were a long way from being even. Chapter 8. Reputation is everything in a small town where everybody knows everybody else's business. I was a teen now, with some money in my pocket, big and strong, looking for respect. I was the first guy to start a fight and the last one to back down from one. Little man's death made something go cold within me. I grew from a heated boy into an angry young man filled with rage. When I couldn't get the white man's respect, I dishonored him by stealing from him. I had no sense of guilt or remorse. I was the injured party. I confiscated because it made me feel powerful and in control. My stealing mocked whites because they weren't able to stop me. What they took from me was theirs. What I took back was mine. It seemed to me that Louisiana was the most violent place in the world. The older I got, the worse it grew. People went to church and cried out to the Lord to stop the suffering, but it seemed like the devil was loose on earth. Hatred consumed me. I was in a barren land, unproductive, unprofitable, worthless. I could not escape it. Racism was suffocating my soul. Every day was exhausting, not knowing who I was, where I could go, when I could speak. Adding fuel to the ever-burning fire was the Ku Klux Klan, a terrorist organization of night riders in flowing white gowns and hoods. They used God to justify hatred, wrapping themselves in Christianity and stealing its holiest symbol, the cross. Cross burning was a sacred Klan rite inviting God to fill a world of darkness with his white light. Hiding behind a twisted patriotism, they wanted America to be a white man's country exclusively. Their efforts to ensure that were violent, destructive, and pitiless. The Klan rampaged through the South, confident it could violate us with impunity. They got away with murder, protected by a secret conspiracy of police, judges, and jurors. Those sworn to protect and serve became the killers of a generation, or silent witnesses to it. They trapped my friends and family in a reign of inhuman terror, lynchings, floggings, castrations, murders, fires, and relentless intimidation. In the 1950s, punishment for a black man getting out of place was swift and brutal. Crowds of Southern whites armed with sticks, bottles, knives, and guns surrounded their victims and eagerly inflicted pain or death. In the summer of 1964, 3 civil rights workers were murdered and their bodies found buried beneath a dam. That was rare. The Klan usually buried its victims so deep the bodies couldn't be resurrected even on Judgment Day. Only one time did they ever come close to getting me. To this day, I don't really remember the reason for the fight or why it escalated to the point where I was fighting off 3 white men in the street covered in dirt and blood while a crowd watched. I looked up and there was my father standing among the white crowd, watching me get beaten without so much as lifting a finger to help me. He didn't call out. He didn't wade in. He just watched as I tried to survive the onslaught, and as the mob turned in his direction, seeking another black man to target with their anger and hatred, he ran off, leaving me there alone. It is a terrible thing to be so unloved, to know your father would rather let you die than lift a finger to help you, to watch him run off and leave you all alone. I knew he didn't love me. I knew he was worthless. I knew he was the bane of my existence when he made all those babies in my mother and treated her so badly. But this kind of pain I had never known. This was no refusal to give me a quarter to go to the movies. It was no casual passing without even a hello. It was a rejection so cold it remains burnt into my memory, and in the end did what even white people could never do, hurt me so deep in my soul that I have never forgotten or forgiven. Context of White Supremacy. Quite a session to begin with this week. We will be picking back up. We are still in Chapter 8. They have breaks within the chapter for some of the segments that we're doing on the book. Most of the time I'm going to try to make sure that we end at the conclusion of a chapter. But right now we are in Chapter 8. And it's right at the break where he says, I have never forgotten or forgiven. That's what we'll be picking up at when we get to the second audio segment. If you got a hard copy of the book, I'm not quite sure where that is, but should be right around the early stages of Chapter 8. Anywho, if you are interested in participating, feel free, chime in. The number to dial is 760-569-7676. The code is 564-940. pound. Press *6 if you would like to participate. That number again, 760 569 7676. The code is 564 943 pound. Press *6 if you would like to participate. If you do not want to use your phone to dial in, the number you can dial, or you can press the button. If you're listening at Black Talk Radio Network, you can just press the button, pretty blatant, in the center of the page. Call the program, click that. If you are not listening at Black Talk Radio Network, you can put in the following address: tiny, tiny.cc/1 race, and that is the number 1. That address one more time: tiny, TINY.cc/1 race, and that is the number 1. When you put that address in, click the link on the left side of the page. It says Flash Player. When you do that, it will open a small window on your screen. On the top line, it is a drop-down menu. Select the number that I just gave out. Again, 760 569 7676. The next line, it will ask for the code. That code again is 564 943. Then on the final line, it will ask for a name, whatever you're comfortable with. You can click random keys. You can put in a nickname. If you're okay with your real name, that's fine too. Once you get that entered, click the green button at the bottom of that window. It will connect you to the live program. You should be able to hear us. It will sound as good as your internet speed allows. It's the same procedure if you would like to join us. Press *6. You'll see the dial pad on your screen. You will hear an audio prompt to press the number 1. Once you do that, I'll see your hand on the switchboard and we can get you on the line. Definitely hope folks have things to say. As I said, this thoroughly enjoying the book. I will say before I get the folks on the line, I am reminded of Isabel Wilkerson's The Warmth of Other Suns, which we did about this time last year, as well as Mr. Fuller and even Shirley Sherrod. All three of them, they are, well, the book and Shirley Sherrod and Neely Fuller Jr., they all said with regards to older black people, when I say older, I mean black people that are over 60, that they did not talk about these types of experiences because it is so painful. And I mean, you talk about unpleasant is putting it mildly. When you have these sorts of reflections, being called nigger every day, the types of humiliation and degradation and downright terrorism that black people had to experience, I don't think it is any wonder. I don't think it's strange at all that you have lots of black people. You have black grandparents or aunts, uncles, that sort of thing, or just older black people that you know. I don't think it's a coincidence at all that many of them just do not talk about these sort of memories. I don't know how many people would want to reflect back and think about childhood friends that were killed, or their own family members and how they were abused and terrorized, or females that they knew, or maybe their sister or someone being raped by a white man. I mean, these are just not things you would want to recollect and share with your children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews. Just that's something that definitely came to mind in hearing a lot of the intense trauma that Mr. Williams shared with us this week. At any rate, I will get the folks that are on the line. Again, *6 if you would like to participate. The couple folks that have hands up, your lines are both open. If you all have things you would like to share, and then other folks who are with us as well. Once I see hands, I'll get your line in also.
Yes, this is Noble. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes. I picked up a highlight on chapter 7 at the beginning where it says, I became fascinated with stealing at the age of 8. I don't know if the thrill was being able to get away with a crime or that the crime was against the white man. And I looked at that and I thought that was interesting how he looked at crime. It seemed like he looked at crime as a form of justice, because he said he didn't know if it was a thrill, because he didn't know if it was him getting away with a crime or getting away with a crime against the white man. I thought that was interesting how he looked at it like that. And where he said Negroes often got arrested for hunting animals for food, I just thought that was a way that white people were practicing racism back then while prohibiting black people from providing means to eat, and just the diminishing in the quality of life and the value in the black life. When you said those animals had more value than we did, and it's kind of crazy because animals are killed as well, but for some reason animals have more value than black people. So, and on page 58 it said, "Boy, you the devil. You go around stealing from them white folks. Them people ain't done nothing to you while you steal their stuff." And I thought that was an interesting line because you rarely hear people indict white people in the same manner and say, white people, you go around stealing those black folk stuff, or they ain't done nothing to you while you stealing their stuff. We don't. A lot of people don't look at it in reverse. It's like when black people do something, they are the devil. But when white people do something, it just seem like they escape without being held accountable. And in chapter 8, I highlighted where it says, "When I couldn't get a white man's respect, I dishonored him by stealing from him. I had no sense of guilt or remorse. I was the injured party. I confiscated because it made me feel powerful and in control by stealing my whites because they weren't able to stop. What they took from me was theirs. What I took back was mine." And I just thought that was interesting how he was taking matters into his own hands and not really waiting on white people to give him anything. He went out and took it. And I know I've heard a lot of non-white people say that, white people shouldn't ask white people or beg, that they need to stop begging white people for justice and they should just take it. And I think that he was one of those, from that passage, he looked like he was one of the ones that did that. He took matters to his own hands. I also highlighted where it says, "People went to church and cried out to the Lord to stop the suffering, but it seemed like the devil was loose on earth. Hatred consumed me. I was in a barren land, unproductive, unprofitable, worthless. I could not escape it." It said, "Racism was suffocating my soul. Every day was exhausting, not knowing who I was, where I could go, when I could speak." I just thought that was a very important line because he was being very introspective and being honest with himself and saying, and I just thought it was interesting how he acknowledged it as racism. He said, "Racism will suffocate my soul." And so I thought that was a way of being codified, and for that time period from where he was writing from, that was to me a very constructive way of looking at the world that he was living in. I highlighted on page 65. It said, "It is a terrible thing to be so unloved, to know your father would rather let you die than lift a finger to help you, to watch him run off and leave you all alone." And I thought that was that whole paragraph. I thought that whole paragraph was significant because me personally, growing up in the late '80s and just being a product of a generation where fathers are not really available in the home, and how that would affect the morale or the self-confidence or self-esteem, growing up. And I just thought that was putting myself in his shoes. I just thought he really articulated how a lot of people feel, unloved and saying that and I just thought the way he painted that picture of saying that knowing your father would rather let you die than lift a finger to help you, and not to shame anyone, because like we said, we are victims of white supremacy, and knowing that probably the reason why his father wouldn't want to help him is because he was afraid that something would happen to him. So, and those are all the comments I had at the time.
Appreciate that. Mr. Demery Ford, do you have any thoughts you wanted to share?
Yes. Greetings. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Greetings, Gus. Greetings, Noble, and to any of the other callers. The book is very interesting, and I believe that Richard is starting to form his plan for success. He's gaining confidence and faith and commitment, and the faith comes with faith in himself. Also noted that in a system of white supremacy, evasiveness for non-white people is very important. Fear is ever-present, and one must learn to use it and develop courage in spite of fear. I thought it was interesting when he was going through the neighborhood and these racists released their dogs on him, and he didn't think of himself, but he thought about women and children. He thought about his own mother and his own sisters, what would happen. And he sort of reacted, fear turned into courage when he bust through the white person's door and took their gun and started to kill those dogs. And he probably, like he said, he probably would have killed every one of them if the black lady across the street hadn't yelled out that she was going to tell his mother. He feared his mother more than he did those dogs or the white people or anything else at that point. Also, interesting point was, I believe it was his mother was quoting, "The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away." And it just struck a nerve with me that, somewhere in my memory, you hear that a lot. But the thing about that is a misquote from the Bible that actually is not even in the Bible. It's a misquote from Job. But if you take under consideration that the mother is uneducated and the fact that religion is playing a big part in her life, and her understanding, she really doesn't understand the concept of God, religion, and all. It's based upon a lot of what she's heard and the conclusions that she's come to. Because when Chile was struck by the racist white female, and as she kept going, the mom said, sometimes things happen for the better. I mean, that's warped, that's twisted. That's not, I don't know what type of religion that is. That's something she made up, because I don't see how that's applicable to a white person running over an innocent kid, hit and run, murdered the kid, kept going, and then she starts rambling some rhetoric about things working for the good for those who love the Lord. That's ridiculous. Anyway, he felt his mother was his hero. He said his mother didn't have a college degree, but she had a PhD in the psychology of life. I'm starting to question some of that, but I think what he means is the mother with that innate sense of intuition that black women seem to have, that gets them through tough times. It's a innate type intelligence that, in spite of the lack of education and the misinformation that she received, she still had intellect about her. I liked his color scheme with the flag. It started out. Let me just regress. In the 1940s, Louisiana education system, the disparities that were present. The schoolhouse was raggedy. You got a drunken principal. You got one lady teacher that is trying to teach 40 kids in one classroom with no funds. At that particular time, the state is supposed to be allocated funds for schools. And we both know from guests that we had on the show that these funds, a lot of times, were misappropriated. A lot of these black schools did not even get the funds that they were allotted, and they were allotted only 25% of what white schools got. And a lot of the black schools probably didn't even get the little bit that they were supposed to get in the first place. Overcrowded classrooms, kids 6 to 14. How do you teach a class, with different age like that? And then you go back to the flag bolted on the side of the raggedy school, and then his color scheme, red, symbolized the shedding of innocent blood, the white for the evil intent of white people, and white supremacy instead of racial superiority. It's that sense of privilege or sense of entitlement that makes up this corrupt terrorist system that we live in, called the system of white supremacy. And then blue, representing the senseless murders of non-white people. He called them his people. I thought that was pretty profound. And he was in an enlightened state to pick up on that. He said that we had been robbed of our heritage. We had no identity. We were just niggers, unlearned, unintelligent, and without hope. And it was ironic that the school, I think the school's name was Little Hope. He said that children picked on him when he was in school, talked about his nose, and consequently he hated his nose. I had to go back, take another look at his picture, because I hadn't noticed his nose before, but I guess you might say it's rather large. But the system creates this self-consciousness in non-white people by warping their sense of beauty. And in non-white people, it creates this self-consciousness to the point that we hate ourselves and all of our African features. That is a terrible thing, but it is real, it exists, and it's played out every day when non-white black people exercise anti-blackness towards other non-white black people, and it results in violence, domestic violence, crimes against their peers and their neighbors and people that look like them. It is all by design. The system is designed for this type of thing to happen. And if we could just wake up and smell the coffee and see, by educating ourselves about what the system is, how it works, maybe we can alleviate some of these atrocities that are being bestowed upon us and some that we're doing to ourselves. And last but not least, the hunting incident. I thought it was strange when he had made the kills. He was walking down Main Street with the kills. First mistake. But this hunting out of season was probably just a racist tactic that the sheriff made up. But it reminded me of the book, Niggers and Squirrels, where he said that the animals had more value than we did. I mute my line.
Yep. Definitely go back in the archives on Niggers and Squirrels, end of 2011. He was talking about an incident, a black male author. He was talking about an incident with his grandfather, who told him, had very similar stories to what Mr. Williams had to share about growing up in Mississippi, that squirrels are worth more than black people. And exact same thing, talking about Chili Bowl's death, where he said that he had seen people kill squirrels out of season and be punished, and black people had been killed, raped, all manner of abuse, and nothing was done about it. Exact same thing Mr. Williams said, just happened to be in Mississippi and not Louisiana. Caller at 6492, did you have something you wanted to share?
Greetings, everyone. Yes, I did. Actually, it disturbed me greatly, but a friend of mine, actually, very nice guy, family man, and I was talking to him about the book, and he kind of paused for a minute. He grew up in Texas, and he started telling me stories about these things happening to him. He was, he is very bright, and he had to go across town to a white school, and white kids would beat him up all the time and chase him home. One time they almost killed him. They beat him with a chain, and he said even as like daylight savings time would end, he would get fearful because then he had to try to come home in the dark, and you'd have to ask if he could leave early. And it's just, and you know, he's not that old. I don't even think he's 40. And just to think it's really not changing, you know, it's going on. And even, you know, in the passage you read today, you know, I thought about Ferguson. They said, you know, that after killing Little Man, there's no formal investigation. No one's ever questioned it, and they did the same thing. You know, that young lady, I can't remember, Maya White. You know, here she was shot in the head, and they didn't bother to question her. You know, it's just sickening just to think that, you know, that it's still here, and just wondering, you know, will it ever? That's what I had to say.
I would just like to talk on like the part about like they're saying like, you know, when black people, like you said, the animals have more value than black people, and how like, you know, it kind of reminded me of what my ancestors told me, like my grandmother and all them told me that, you know, black people could get shot down like deals, you know, like it wasn't no, like now, sometimes, I ain't gonna say every time, because a lot of times, don't nothing happen when a white person shoot a black person, especially an officer of the so-called law. But back then, you know, private citizens just, you know, shoot you, you know, and there wasn't nothing to be did about it. And then it kind of reminds me of another thing. I remember an older gentleman, he probably was about like 71, 72. And I remember I was talking a whole bunch of crap. I was like, man, if I was alive back in them days, man, the KKK would have did this. Man, I would have beat their tail. I would have shot one of them. I don't play. I would have shot one of them. He said, man, you wouldn't have did nothing. And then, you know, it kind of made me think of their father, Venus and Serena Williams' father. I should know his name. That's why I'm listening to the program, but I don't know his name. But when he was saying that that his father watched him get beat and didn't help him, you know, and you know, if his father would have shot one of those white people, you know, like the elder man told me, he said, man, even if they would have killed his father, I know if his father would have got away, they would have killed his son. They would have went and killed a person who wasn't even in the same vicinity as the assault was going down. You see what I'm saying? So I really don't look at his father in no less of a light. You know, yeah, you know, I would say what I would do. Everybody could say what they would do. But I don't look at his father no less of a light because I understand that if his father probably stepped in and did something, that would have boosted him up even more, and he probably would not be alive today, and we wouldn't even know who the Venus and Serena Williams would even is. You know what I'm saying? But I just wanted to add that in, and also about the little man getting lynched. You know, it was I don't know, it was like I visualized it. The way he broke that down, it was like I could see it. You know, the hands, the burnt hands tied up with rope on the fence, man. That was very, I say, tragic, man. It was very tragic. And whoever little man is, you know, it's pretty sad that he had to go that type of way, you know. But, because he, young child, you know. But I mute my line.
Absolutely. Appreciated that point about Mr. Williams' father as well. If other folks have comments they want to get in, people that haven't shared, or if it's any of the people that are on the line have other comments, we should have about another 25 minutes or so before we get to the next section. I just wanted to make sure that I got in, number one, that sentence Very succinct, but I mean, racism was suffocating my soul. Wow. I also thought when they were talking a lot about Low Man, and I mean, just because of the report that we shared a couple weeks back about the empathy gap, where white people, or really nobody, white people, non-white people, black people, nobody empathizes with black people at all. But a part of that report also again emphasized that no one sees black children as children. These deaths that we were privy to this week, Chili Bowl and Lil Man, these are children. I mean, not that it's any better when it's a Renisha Big Brother. Well, she was 19 too, but I'm even trying to think of an adult. Jonathan Crawford, he's in his 20s. I mean, that's horrendous. I'm not saying that, you know, that doesn't make it any better when it's adult, but I mean, these are children, young children, being gunned down, shot. Oh, I mean, just that is, and the manner with, excuse me, with Chili Bowl to just be ran over in the street and she doesn't even stop. I mean, just whatever, broad daylight. Oh, well, I ran over a nigger and messed up my car. I'll get my headlight fixed tomorrow and keep it pushing. For Low Man, going out stealing. Again, young child, not reprimanded, not, you know, you get taken to court and we make a decision about this, but I mean, to chop your hands off and then hang you, and God knows what else. I mean, I think I assume that many of us have probably studied and read and heard about a lot of the just heinous and masochistic conduct of white terrorists at this time period, and even on today, Abner Louima et al. But just that these are children, and when he talks about at school, I guess a little while after Chili Bowl, a little while after Chili Bowl's death, murder really, and his black classmates are acting it out, I guess, laying on the ground like Chili Bowl was laid out like this. That to me, number one, it just made me think, number one, as he said, violence was everywhere. I mean, to get to that point where you're that desensitized about a black, not just some random black person that you know, a black person that you went to school with who used to sit, you know, a few feet from where you sit right now, to be that desensitized where this is something that, you know, we joke about, you know, we make fun of this. That, I mean, just lets me know the gravity, the intensity of the terrorism that, I mean, that is, racism is suffocating our soul. That's what I would expect when people's souls are being strangled by the white supremacy that they're having to deal with on a daily basis. That, and I think that detachment, I even see with that, that's how you end up having people where a father, attempted father, can see his offspring being attacked, perhaps even killed, and doesn't make an effort to intervene at all. Not that he could have done that much, but hey, you just turn and run. I think that sets the stage for just not caring about other black people. I'm not attached to other black people. I think, in fact, just keep listening for this week, but just having that detachment and being desensitized to the plight of other black people, regardless of what it is. Even I think we heard at the very beginning of the book last week when Julia Metcalf Williams, Mr. Williams' mother, when she was pregnant out in the rain and trying to get to the hospital, and people didn't help her. White and black people didn't help her. She ultimately did get a ride from a black male that she went to church with, but just, I think that begins at a very early age, even to this day. I think you have that sort of just lack of concern and compassion for other black people. I thought that was significant as well. The person that called in from a block number, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. It's just Dr. Angelo was saying that courage is a strengthening exercise. You start off with little acts of courage, and I was thinking about Mr. Williams' father. I mean, that would have been a tremendous act of courage from a person who'd never even bothered to have the courage to marry the mother of his children, or raise his own children, or to try and pay a bill, or to just be there the next day. So, no, absolutely not. This is someone who never even tried to strengthen his courage, and to expect something like that at the last minute. No, and no, he's never going to be forgiven, because that was absolutely horrible, and children don't forgive their parents abandoning them in their time of greatest need. It's just almost never forgiven. And next, I have to say that she was a great mom, despite, I have to agree with Mr. Dimmy for, that thinking, that's something else. But she was a great mom, because she kept her son alive. While all the other children were, just dropping by the wayside, she kept her son alive. And that's something my family has always said, yeah, all your little raggedy friends are welcome over here, so that we know where our children are. And that's the kind of attitude you have to have. Whatever attitude you have to keep your children safe, even if it means, fooling yourself. And the last thing, what was it? She said, it was that, I forget. I didn't write it down. Sorry about that. But those were two observations that I had.
It'll come to you. It'll come back to you. Did you all? If anybody had anything else they wanted to get in, that's fine too. All the people that dialed in, you should. I just wanted to get in real quick that passage from Richard Williams' mother, where this is after the hunting incident, where he was beaten and comes home. She thinks he's dead and realizes he was just passed out or trying to recuperate. And he tells her what happened. I mean, that you talk about pitiful, poignant and pitiful. But when he's seeing her, she's so happy that, we have meat. And then he has to tell her, no, we don't have it. The sheriff took it, and then he beat me and almost killed me. When she says, Richard, I love you and your sisters more than anything in this world. But if I had known life would be like this for you children, I'm not sure I would have had none of y'all. Did anybody have any thoughts on that passage?
I know one thing that reminded me of Tupac saying that one time in his song, talking about why we won't bring a child in the world like this. I forgot, was it on All Eyes on Me or whatever that nature, kind of reminded me of him making that statement.
Well, I think that is a logical statement, personally, because I just advocate the replacement white supremacy with justice, because bringing children into the system of white supremacy is not going to do anything but create more victims. And I think that if white people were able to create a inclusive system of justice, and that there would not be any victims, and it would be a world for children to be born into. So I think I can see where the point of view where she's coming from.
I think she was just feeling sorry for herself, because black women, the people I know, they love their children. It's just like he was saying, that man, I couldn't believe it. He loved that horse more than he loved his children. That's common with white people. They'll love any other thing more than they love their children. But even for us, even we love our children so much. I'm thinking that it wasn't his suffering that she felt bad about. It was her own, for what she perceived as her failure to protect him. And she was feeling absolutely miserable about her failure to protect her son from all of that. And she was just feeling sorry for herself. And I think that's why she said that was a particularly low moment for her. It's not that she didn't want her children around and didn't love them more than anything else in the world and wouldn't give everything she had for her children. She was just having a moment of feeling sorry for herself for not being able to be the mother that she wanted to be.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Not to beat up on another victim, but that is probably the worst thing that you could say to a child. I mean, when she laid down with R.D. or whatever his name was, you know, she told her son in the beginning it was none of his business. He didn't have anything to contribute, but she went and picked cotton in the fields and let this guy come by at night and make. He had, what, 3 sisters and himself. You know, we have to hold her accountable somewhere. I mean, you know, if it had been nowadays when she was spanking him, she'd be in Adrian Peterson's position right now. You know, I mean, when do you have any sense of responsibility? When you create a human being, whether you get any help or not, there's been a lot of women that raise kids by themselves. They got 2 and 3 jobs and did whatever they had to do. But you going to turn around and tell your kid they wish they had never been born or she wouldn't have never had them? That gives them a complex that they take to the grave with them. I don't agree with it. And I think she needs to stand up. She was his greatest hero with, you know, she couldn't do nothing wrong, but, you know, come on.
Mm-hmm. I like to repeat Neely Fuller. What Neely Fuller said, in this system of white supremacy, also known as racism, there's no such thing as a black mother, and there's no such thing as a black father. There's no such thing as a black family. How could she have knowledge of what to say and what not to say to her child when there was nothing before her? Her parents were not really parents. You know, probably, you're thinking about his mother. His mother probably was either the grandchild of a slave, or either the child of a former slave. Because this is not his parents probably was not too far separated from slavery. So somebody who probably was sold away, they couldn't train them really of how to be a good parent. So I didn't see too much fault in what she said. I really didn't. I don't think it probably would be a good idea to say that to a child, but I don't really fault her for what she said. Because at the same time, who's gonna train her on how to be a good parent? I think all of us are flawed in that sense. All of us are flawed in that sense because we can't even protect the children now. Like I look at I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna end. I look at Trayvon Martin's parents, father. I look at Michael Brown's father. Zimmerman is still alive. What type of parent would let the killer of their child walk free on the planet after you killed their child? You see, a victim of racism. That's who. You see what I'm saying? And I don't think any black person should be held accountable. I think the white supremacists is to blame, but, I'm learning and I'm listening. And that's why I appreciate other people's opinion so I can see different perspectives. I'm mute my line.
I just want to make sure we didn't miss anybody. Did the caller at last 4 digits, 3372, did you have a comment you wanted to get in?
I'm at a football game. I apologize for that. I heard that when you said you were reading about if I knew life was going to be so hard, I would not have never, had you all. And I can remember thinking about that, and me and my young cousins, I'm talking when we were like 10, 11, just talking about how you're going to grow up and how many kids you're going to have and everything. And we were like, you know, I don't even want to have kids because it's just too hard out here. And I wouldn't dare bring a kid into the world. I mean, none of us stuck to it. We all had kids, but it's just, that just made me think as a young kid, those thoughts. Thank you. I'm going to leave my line. They're coming in and be loud. Sorry about that.
Okay. Right on. Cal's at the football game. We got about 8 minutes left for the second audio. Did anybody else have any comments they wanted to get in?
Yes, can I hear?
I heard both of you.
I was just going to say, I recall Tupac had a quote where in one of his books where he said, "Fear is stronger than love." And going back to that passage where it was talking about how the father was kind of like frozen and really was kind of like detached from, you know, his son and everything. And I just think that white people have a way of prying into the psyche of black people, non-white people, to a point to where they can make non-white people so afraid that it'll override their love that they will have for other non-white people. And what I mean by that is, I think that black love should be more powerful than white fear. And just saying that, I think that as non-white people working to replace white supremacy with justice, we have to have, like Dr. Francis Wilson said, that self-respect. That black self-respect has to be higher than the fear of what white people would do to us. And I just think that if fear is always if we're always afraid of what white people are going to do to us and afraid to stand up for each other, you know, we'll never replace this white person with justice. There will be accomplices to it. And that was my comment.
Okay. Can I be heard? On the caller from Alabama, I just would like to say, if you saw the movie 12 Years a Slave and compare Elijah when she lost her children and how many days and months she cried and longed for her kids, and then somebody to tell their child that they wish they had never had them. I mean, it seems like a stark comparison, because Elijah would have done just about anything short of giving up her life just to have her kids with her to go through the hard times that they were going through. At least they would have been together. See, when you're poor and you don't have anything, I've heard it said that at least we had each other. But if you're going to feel like you're unloved from your father and that your mother wished she hadn't ever had you, I just take my hat off to the guy that he succeeded in life in spite of these obstacles. I'll mute my line.
That's a great point. Hey, guys, man, when you said something, you kind of made me think about something, too. When you said something about how numb people have became to the Black Death, it kind of made me think about, like, is that the reason we have so much violence on the streets with black people, other black people killing black people? It's like we see the same, lack of value in life as the white supremacists did. They trying to train us on how to not value each other's lives. And, the thing is, like I said, I understand that lady, Mr. Williams' mother, she did, that was an incorrect statement. I'm not defending that statement at all. I do think that probably was a bad thing to say to your own child. But like I said, I don't think she had it in the proper training. I think she just said what she knew. I've seen people do worse to their child. I remember growing up, people would take their children around to the store, which I grew up in the open-air drug market. meaning that crack was sold like fruit on the fruit stand. You know, like I grew up around, anybody who grew up in the crack era know the open air drug market is. Probably people before the crack era. But I remember parents going to buy crack with their children. You see, so it's like, when is a proper parent? A victim of racism cannot be a proper parent. You know, a proper parent would not allow the system of white supremacy to exist. A proper parent could not, you could not be a subject to white supremacy and be a parent at the same time, because white supremacy overrides your authority as a parent, and we have no knowledge. But like I said, I understand that clearly, and I'm not debating the point because I understand what was said. All I just want to be is somebody to speak up for the lady, because she probably not even alive. Not if she on the phone to speak up for herself. All I'm saying is, who's to train her on to be a proper parent? Who's going to do that? No, you know, she probably, and then again, let me say this too. She probably was not as smart as some of the other people. Her knowledge, you know, like the knowledge she has, is probably not smart as other people. So she probably didn't have knowledge enough to know that was wrong. You see what I'm saying? Everybody speaks from their position in life, but who knows where she was coming from and her intellect. You know, I missed my line, but like I said, point well taken, and like I said, I appreciate the listen and learn.
I really agree with that. I really do.
May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
You know, there was another paragraph that went with that. I think she was just in a moment of despair. It said, I could see the hurt, not just in her eyes, but in her walk. She climbed the steps slowly, head hung low. She had a defeated spirit and a depleted heart. On the last step, she looked back and said, I thought you were dead. You were dead. I'm glad you're alive, Richard. And he said, so was I. So I don't, you know, I think that was just an outburst. It wasn't, she didn't really mean it. We all say things we don't mean. But, and that's the way he took it too. He you know, she was glad he was alive. She didn't really mean to say, she didn't want him to, didn't want him. It was just that moment, just the idea of all the suffering he had gone through.
Yeah. He loves his mom. I mean, that's a contrast to how he feels about his dad. She must have loved him back.
Yeah. And she was able to show it, you know. And I would love to talk to the dad, just out of curiosity, what was going through your mind during all this? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I also didn't want it glossed over Chili Bowl's family when he went to their house, and they had one fork, one spoon, and one knife. I think last week we had some of the just explicit details on the suffering poverty that the black people in Louisiana, Shreveport specifically, were dealing with. I'm not sure I've ever in my life been to a residence where they had one fork, one spoon, and one knife. And breaking a fork or breaking any piece of silverware is a major infraction that might warrant a beating. I didn't want that glossed over either. Quickly, before we get to the second audio clip, I just wanted to insert, I believe, Toni Morrison's Beloved, where it's about formal plantation slavery, where I think a major aspect of the plot of that book, ultimately film, is black people on the plantation refusing to have children and even killing their own infant children because they did not want them to be slaves. That is something that comes up quite a bit in dialogue, discussions, people talking about formal plantation slavery, where black people just could recognize. They did not want their child, almost verbatim what Mr. Williams' mother, Julia Metcalf Williams, what she said about not wanting her child to have to go through all that suffering. So that it's not like I have not heard this expressed before by black people who were victims of racism, white supremacy. I understand the logic of why someone would make a statement or feel that way, even though I think she totally loved and appreciated having her all of her children, not just Richard Williams, but all of her children alive. I think Mr. Demery had mentioned the misquote from the Bible. One of our listeners wanted to make sure we had that as well, from Job 1, verse 21, and said, "Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." I believe that is the actual verse that we heard. I would say, number one, to Mr. Caller in Alabama's point about that numbness in terms of black people just being detached and black death being such a constant thing that it just becomes very trivialized. Just keep listening. That'll come up in the second segment. And also how that applies today. Keep listening. That'll come up in the second segment. There'll be more black death in the second segment, so you can pay attention to all that. And even, I think, the concluding sentence to chapter 9, that's what we're ending at today, that also will be right there. Just keep listening. We will go ahead and get to the second audio segment. That is so cool. People at the football game listening to the context of white supremacy. Right on. We will have ample time. So if you had something that you wanted to get in about the first audio segment and didn't have time to get it in, shouldn't be a problem. Just jot a note so that you remember. We are picking up, as I said, we are in chapter 8. There's a break, right? So it's I have never forgotten or forgiven break. And that's what we're starting at, kind of the early portion of chapter 8, if you're following along. Context of white supremacy. Mr. Richard Williams, Black and White, The Way I See It. Audio segment number 2. Every time I broke the rules, it brought me closer to death, but it never stopped me. Anger was my life. I found strength challenging the Klan to see how far I could go. The whites only and colored only signs on water fountains and buildings and restaurant counters were my flags, symbols of my fight. I was playing with fire and I got to like it. I entered stores through the front door. I put money in clerks' hands. I walked tall and proud. I browsed around. I picked up a pack of Kool-Aid and went right to the counter to pay for it. The owner scowled. "Boy, the back door is for coloreds. Now get out of here and come back in through the back door." I stood my ground. Thump! A bat crashed against my head. I fell to my knees and fell forward with warm blood flowing down my forehead and into my eyes. The owner yelled, "Throw that nigger in the street before he bleeds all over my store." White men grabbed my feet and dragged me out. My head bounced down the front steps. The pain was excruciating. Blood was everywhere. No one called a doctor. I lay in the street moaning. Didn't they see me? Will somebody help me? I gasped. No one helped. No one cared. Finally, the police arrived and without question or hesitation, cuffed me and threw me into the back of the police car. My crime was wanting to be treated like a man. If I was a criminal for that, things were going to get a lot worse very soon. My stealing increased. The more I stole, the more I invalidated the strength of white people who wanted to keep me down. But I had to be real careful. If I was caught in the act, I would be tortured and killed, just like Lil Man, and my hands hung from a fence. That said, it was easy to spot danger in the form of white people. None of them would have any problem turning me in. The greater problem was other blacks. We were all encouraged to be good niggers and rewarded for turning in other blacks. Whites taught Negroes the more they ratted out the bad Negroes, the better off the good ones would be. They were given gifts, a hog, a pig, or a chicken in exchange for exposing another man's activities. To me, a black man who would turn in another black man was almost worse than any white. It made me sick. As my war grew deadlier, one of these casualties was an old black man named Mr. Percy. No one knew if Percy was his first name or last. Everybody just called him that. He was a tall, heavy-set man, about 50 years old. According to Mr. Percy, his left arm had been severed at the elbow years before by 5 white men in a pickup who jumped him coming home from the fish creek. They punched him in the stomach and pushed him on the ground. 4 of them held his hands and legs. The 5th man took a blade and sawed his arm off at the elbow. He told the story like it was just a matter of fact, strangely, without anger or resentment. Nor did he say one derogatory word about the men who harmed him. I cried uncontrollably, lost in pity and sorrow for him. "Why did they cut your arm off, Mr. Percy?" "Them old hunters wouldn't feed their dogs for 10, 11, or 12 days. Then they would run 'em and work 'em real hard. By then they'd be starving. So the white men made a game out of finding Negroes and cutting off parts of their bodies and feeding them to the dogs." It took me a long time to sleep, digesting that. At the height of my war against white people, stealing and selling everything I could take, Mr. Percy told me, "Richard, if you don't stop stealing cookies and taking the white man's cotton, both your arms and legs gonna get cut off. Then you won't have no hands to steal with and no legs to run with. If them people knew how much you stole from them, they'd just as soon kill your mama and your sisters too." Maybe he was talking out of concern. To me, it felt like he was siding with my enemies. 3 weeks later, Mr. Percy stopped me near a farm owned by a white man named Stabler as I was on my way to steal his cotton. "You out there stealing again, Richard?" "Ain't no need to lie, son. I know you stealing Mr. Stabler's cotton, 'cause I seen you out there one night with my own eyes. I'm a night watchman over at his cotton gin. Richard, if you keep it up, I'm gonna have to turn you in." I put my face close to his. I don't plan to stop taking nothing from the white bastards. All they do is take from us. They take our lives. They rape our women. They drown us in the lake and drag us through the street till we dead. They embarrass our parents by calling them aunt and uncle. They've been treating us like this from one generation to the next. My parents, their parents, their parents' parents. You such a loyal nigger, You work hard for them white bastards all night and still have to push your ice cream cart by day to make more money 'cause they ain't paying you a damn thing. I was hot and crazy with rage. Mr. Percy, if you ever tell the white devil on me or tell anybody else, I'll take an axe and cut off your other arm and both your legs. I pulled the ice pick I kept with me all the time out of my jacket. I used it a lot when I confiscated things. I put it against Mr. Percy's throat. Now you listen up. I'll be stealing from Mr. Stabler's place every night from now on. You my night watchman now, and if you see the white man getting close, you better let me know, 'cause if you don't, I'll kill you and your whole family. Mr. Percy was wild-eyed. He said, trembling, "You cut Jamie Lee's throat, didn't you?" "Yes, I cut his throat," I bragged. Jamie Lee Amos lived in Cedar Grove on Fairfield and 73rd Street. I got in a fight with him at Carver High School at a basketball game, and Jamie Lee's gang vowed to get me. When he and his friends surrounded me, I grabbed the person closest to me, who happened to be Jamie Lee, and stuck the pick in his throat. He didn't die, but he sure bled a lot, and everybody got the message not to mess with me one more time. I held that same ice pick at Mr. Percy's throat till he swore he would never tell the white man what I was doing. I was angry with Mr. Percy because he personified the typical Negro. Maybe I saw some of myself in him, and I couldn't bear it. It killed me. He was so goddamn eager to turn me in. I continued my acts of defiance against white people, while other disturbing events were taking place all around me. Shreveport hadn't built any swimming pools in our neighborhood, so the only decent place to swim was at Lakeside next to Booker T. Washington High School. Gang members controlled this area and beat up black kids who walked past their street corner. Shreveport had more than its share of gangs. There were the Line Street Boys, the Cedar Grove Gang, the 22 Caliber Gang, the Crooks, and the Hustlers. As with society's current plague of gangbangers, it surprised and disgusted me how easily blacks could terrorize their own. Decades later, my struggle in Compton acquainted me with gangs of the same mentality who destroyed black communities by preying on other blacks without mercy. With gang violence running high, black parents warned their children to stay away from Lakeside. My mom said, "Richard, promise me you won't go swimming out there. A lot of strange things going on at them places. Maybe you ought to just swim in the ditches like the other children." All the homes in Cedar Grove had drainage ditches around them. During the rainy season, they kept water from flooding the houses. Even more practical, you could jump over the ditches into the fields when whites chased us in their trucks and they couldn't cross over to catch you. They were also an ideal place to swim. However, as a teenager, I had long outgrown swimming in ditches. That was child's play. Several mysterious drownings of Negro children occurred that summer. We believed whites were drowning them if they got caught swimming by themselves at the popular swimming holes. Rumor held that the murderers bragged around town about how they drowned that black-ass nigger. In spite of the danger, some Negro boys insisted on swimming there. I was one of them. We swam in the Ollie Fountain and the Red River. It was a case of sink or swim, since most of us were inexperienced swimmers. At the time, my best friend was Augustine Gardner. I thought no one would ever replace Chili Bowl or Lil Man, but as the years went on, Augustine did. We were inseparable. We shared common interests like shooting marbles, fishing, hunting, and swimming. I loved having a best friend, someone to talk to about my plans and dreams. I wanted to protect him as Chili Bowl had once protected me. So even though we were best friends, I never let him in on my business schemes that involved confiscation. If I ever got caught, Augustine wouldn't be an accomplice to my crimes. Like my father, Augustine's father had walked away from his family, and Augustine had to take over the man of the house role too. We worked hard to help our families. We made a pact that one day we would leave Shreveport together and see what the rest of the world was like. It never happened. Augustine went swimming alone in the Red River. Some of our buddies found him floating face down in the water. Someone had bound his feet and hands, and he was naked. Rumors spread through the neighborhood. Some claimed Augustine's genitals had been chopped off. Others said his body was tarred and feathered. Yet another said the fish had eaten his eyes out. To me, it didn't matter how he died. I could not dismiss the terrible fact that Augustine Gardner was dead at 16. For the third time in my young life, I had lost my best friend. From that day on, I made myself a promise never to take a chance on friendship again. To this day, I have kept that promise. Chapter 9. To the amazement of most of the people who knew me, it was 1959, and I was still alive. Wrongful deaths, accidental drownings, and false imprisonments had taken their toll on the community, and few understood why I hadn't suffered the same fate. Shreveport was a mortuary. Death was its business, and those who remained were dying. We were detoured into back roads, sidelines, ditches, and alleyways. Tired of being a silent passenger on the road of life, I wanted control of my fate. Despite the plight of my people, or perhaps because of it, in my heart, I grew married to the idea of achieving the American dream. I was a businessman, and I was a thief. In short, I was a capitalist. I felt that too many of my people looked to the white man or his government to provide for them. If my fate was really in my hands and I wanted to rise above poverty, I began to think I had to leave Shreveport. My family reacted to my idea of leaving Shreveport with dire skepticism. I understood their reluctance. My mom had gotten work as a janitor at the Little Hope School, and no matter how little hope it held, she wanted me to have the same job. I couldn't bear to think of a life like that. As her criticism increased, my desire to escape grew. Needing a listening ear and an understanding heart, I turned to the one person I knew who could advise me, an 80-year-old foot soldier in the army of the Lord named Mr. Beaumont. Mr. Beaumont was the preacher at the Church of God in Christ on the East 80th Street and Fairfield, a church he had built when he was 70 years old. Mr. Beaumont collected the food that supermarkets threw out at the end of every day: fruit, bread, meat, and canned goods. He loaded it all on a wagon and pulled it through the street, ringing a bell as he came through, so people would know he was there and come out to get some food. For many, he was a godsend. Mr. Beaumont went about his work in his own quiet but forceful way. He provided for many who could not provide for themselves. He was neither subservient nor arrogant, and when he spoke, his words went straight to my heart. "God don't need no coward soldier, Richard," was his bold command I liked best. Everyone credited Mr. Beaumont's longevity to his unyielding faith. Trusting, never doubting, he believed one day God would wash all the tears away. He had no words of revenge or retaliation. He spent his time reading the Bible and took every passage to heart. His message to the congregation was to rejoice and give thanks to God and to love thine enemy. Love thine enemy. I wanted to kill the enemy. It was inconceivable to me that Mr. Beaumont could rejoice in the midst of pain and find peace in the middle of a racial war. Yet I respected him deeply. Perhaps it was just that Mr. Beaumont stood so steadfastly for something definite, something real. He had substance, unlike my father, who stood for nothing and went where the wind blew. Despite my own notion of what was right and wrong, Mr. Beaumont was as solid as a deep-rooted tree, a man of conviction. I followed the railroad tracks that divided the Negro community from the white to Mr. Beaumont's house on the outskirts of town. The farther I got, the more uninviting it became. The poorest of the poor lived here, in houses varying from tiny cottages to dilapidated shacks with cardboard windows. Mr. Beaumont lived in a small wooden house with no running water and no inside plumbing. Surprisingly, he had a TV. Across the road, a cotton field stretched across the horizon, with pickers moving slowly across it while Mr. Beaumont drove a mule-drawn plow wagon. When he saw me on the porch, he called, "Be right there, son. Have a seat." I wasn't sure how to begin. I wanted to talk about so many things. Thoughts cascaded through my head as Mr. Beaumont drove over and shook the reins off the mules. He mounted the porch steps, mopping his brow, and said kindly, "Now, Richard, what's all this about? Why you come to see me?" Looking at his wrinkled face, gray hair, and honest eyes, I thought Mr. Beaumont was the model of the Southern Negro. He was dressed in overalls, work boots, and a straw sun hat. He moved slowly and made no move to prompt me, and words suddenly poured from my mouth. "Mr. Beaumont, I've been searching for my piece of the American pie. You think they give some of that pie to Negroes? If they don't, I want mine. If I have to die to get it, that's okay. Ain't gonna let nothing or nobody steal my hope, 'cause I've been dreaming too long. It's got to be better somewhere, and I'm gonna find out where. You know what I mean, Mr. Beaumont?" He wiped an old kerchief over his face and nodded slowly. "Only trouble is, in order to find the pie you looking for, you might have to leave this place, 'cause you ain't gonna find it here in Louisiana, Texas either. Was this the affirmation I had come for? So should I leave? Son, I've been alive about 80 years now, and done lived long enough to know you might have to go to another country to do the things you talking about. He laughed. Them white folks ain't gonna give you no pie crust either, he said jokingly. He gestured around. All I have is a truck, 2 mules, a church house, and this old 3-bedroom shack that's falling apart. Everything else, Richard, they took. But I still got something. I got Jesus. Here, now come with me. He motioned me to follow him to the wagon, and his hands trembled as he slowly pulled himself into the driver's seat. The 2 mules hitched to the wagon were as black as night. I noticed that one had a short leg as I climbed aboard, but the ride was still a smooth one. We traveled in silence down the dusty road, and the quiet settled in all around us as the light faded and the first night insects began to murmur. We passed shack after shack and finally came to a large piece of land that stretched as far as the eye could see. I used to own this land a long time ago, Mr. Beaumont said. Me, my wife, and children lived here for many years. We had people working for us picking cotton back then. A poor white family, the Dixons, lived just down the road. It was so hard back then, sometimes we gave them food 'cause they didn't have nothing. We was good neighbors and got along pretty good. But after a while, Mr. Dixon started acting a little funny. The children used to play together, but he stopped them. I couldn't figure it out at first, but I started seeing a lot of strange white men going to his house. Sometimes they'd walk down here and stand in the road looking at me plowing the field with my mule. I heard them men gave Dixon a hard time about a nigger having a mule and he didn't have one. Seemed like he got meaner and meaner, and he ended up treating me just like the rest of the white folks. He started calling me nigger too. We never had a lot of trouble in this part of town with white folks come to burn you out and things. One night, we heard a lot of noise outside, and I got my rifle and went to see what the racket was about. There was a cross burning in the front yard. Didn't need nobody to tell me where it came from. It was the Klan. People in the neighborhood got worried because they thought the Klan was going to start bothering us. But it seemed like it was just me they was after. They'd ride by in a truck hollering and calling me nigger. One day, Dixon and 2 white men caught me by surprise while I was plowing the field. One of them was a tall, ugly man with eyes like the devil himself. He kept staring at me and I could feel the hate. He said, "How a poor nigger like you get enough money to buy that mule? Dixon here is a white man and he don't have a mule." I just said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You think you an important nigger, don't you, boy?" I said, "No, sir," and kept my head down, 'cause if I looked him in the eye, he'd have thought I was disrespecting him. He said, "A lot of things can happen to a smart-ass nigger like you. You better watch yourself, boy." I said, "Yes, sir." When I got up the next morning, my mule was laying in the field dead. Somebody cut his throat and he bled to death. Wasn't no need to call the police, 'cause the law wasn't on a Negro's side no way. I nodded vigorously. That's why I want to leave this place and go north, Mr. Beaumont. Bet you they don't treat Negroes like dogs there. He just nodded kind of weary-like and didn't say anything. Just flicked the reins. Mr. Beaumont, did you ever want to fight them back? I asked. His tired old smile seemed to come from a long way off. I wanted to fight back plenty of times, but I didn't. Wasn't 'cause I was no coward either. Just I wasn't a man no more. Them white folks took my manhood away from me every time they beat me, every time they called me nigger, every time they called me boy. They took my manhood every time the whip hit my back, every time my head got kicked in by a boot. They took it every time the boss man asked me, "Are you a nigger or a Negro?" And he kicked me in my stomach till I screamed, "I'm a nigger, boss. I'm a nigger. Please don't kick me no more." Tears flowed from his eyes. He shook his fist. But I am a man, Richard. I got up. It takes a strong man to be beat down and keep getting up. He pointed toward the land, colored gray by the evening mist. One night, they came out here dressed in them white masks and robes. They set my barn on fire, and my animals just burnt up. My wife knew something was wrong that night before it happened. She said God showed her a vision in her dream. When the dogs started barking, my wife and the children went out the back door and hid in the woods. We had a shed built out there behind some bushes, and the only way you seen it, you had to know it was there. No sooner had they got out the back door, men broke the front door down. They beat me, broke my ribs, and knocked my teeth out. One of 'em said, "Ain't no nigger got no business owning no land. Now sign this paper or we gonna burn your house to the ground." I signed it and lost my land. One of 'em said, "Now pay the nigger what the land's worth." Another man dropped a nickel on the floor and they left. Mr. Beaumont stared off into his own personal hell, a place I would not fully understand until years later. He shrugged. I used to be so angry about that. But none of us don't own nothing. Everything I got belonged to God, even my life. They can't take that unless God give it to them. I'm too old to fight a war I can't win. Too old. All this will be over soon, and I'll finally have some peace. He looked at me in the twilight. His face was hard set, his eyes steely, so different from the preacher I had always known. "Richard, the only way you gonna get some peace on this earth is to get right with God and make sure you leave Shreveport. You say you want a piece of the American pie. America ain't gave us nothing but hell. So don't think they gonna give you a piece of anything. If you get a piece, it'll be spoiled and rotten." He flicked the reins hard. The mules surged. There was wind now. It stirred the tops of the trees like a storm was coming. He turned his gaze on me, and it was a fearful thing. "Richard, in my heart, I know God's got something special for you to do, but you can't get it done here. Get out of here while you can. God'll make a way. Ain't nothing here for you, son. Nothing at all." Context of White Supremacy. We will begin next week, Chapter 10. Folks who would like to chime in, the number to dial, 760 569 7676. The code 564 943 pound. Press star 6 if you would like to participate. We should have about a half hour left. Folks can feel free. Everyone who dialed in, line should be open. Feel free to share your thoughts. Yes, sir.
Yes, it's Noble again. Picking up in chapter 9, I highlighted where it says, despite the plight of my people, or perhaps because of it, in my heart I grew married to the idea of achieving the American dream. I was a businessman, and I was a thief. In short, I was a capitalist. I felt that too many of my people looked to the white man or his government to provide for them. It was two parts in that passage that stood out to me when he said, I was a businessman and I was a thief. In short, I was a capitalist. I thought it was interesting how he summed it up, and he defined what a capitalist is, and basically saying that we're living in a capitalist society, and basically to be a businessman is to be a thief. And I just thought it was interesting how his understanding of the system, that the economic system that we live in, I just thought it was just good that he was so aware of how things work. And when he said he felt too many people look to the white man or his government to provide for them, I think that goes back to economics, because, if people are economically disadvantaged, or, they're going to be dependent, or they're going to look to the people who have the resources. So, and I noticed that a lot with a lot of us non-white people, we tend to, as victims, we tend to look at other non-white people and say, well, why are so many people want to work 9 to 5 and do this stuff? I mean, but when there's nothing, when there's not an alternative to what is the current system, then people are doing what they have to do to survive. I just think until that people need that non-white people can do better and having more compassion for one another. So, as far as what people are doing out here to survive. Also on page 72, he said, "Love thy enemy." I wanted to kill the enemy. It was inconceivable to me that Mr. Beaumont could rejoice in the midst of pain and find peace in the middle of a racial war. And again, I just thought that Mr. Williams was very codified. He said a racial war. And it seemed like he was ahead of his time, because the terminology he used and just his awareness of things was just, he was just very aware of what the situation was at hand. It seemed like he was very less confused about white supremacy, which is kind of amazing, because at the time period that he was in, it was not, from what he was describing, it was not popular to be so aware and to be so honest and open about, racism. And he said, "Love thy enemy." I wanted to kill the enemy. I thought that was just the most codified way of looking at his situation, because he was just being honest. I think a lot of times, as victims of white supremacy, we don't really want to be honest about how we really feel, as far as the ninth area of activity, where it says war. And when you're at war, it's like, okay, when they say treat others how they want to treat, how you want to be treated. And Mr. Richard Williams was saying, okay, white people are killing us, so I guess they want to be killed. If they're treating us the way they want to be treated. So I'm just putting my mind in his mind, and I'm understanding where he's coming from and looking at it from a codified point of view, and saying that he was logical in what he was doing. I mean, he was engaging in counter warfare. And I just think that we can learn a lot from that. I think that he showed a lot of courage and bravery and just boldness and just just being determined to just not back down and just face what he was dealing with and what he was seeing. And also on page 74, he said, "We was good neighbors, got along pretty good, but after a while, Mr. Dixon started acting a little funny. Sometimes they walk a little on down. He said, sometimes they walk down here and stand in the road looking at me, plowing the field with me, hurting, give Mr. Dixon a hard time about a nigga having a mule when he didn't have one. Seemed like he got meaner and meaner, and he ended up treating me just like the rest of the white folk. He started calling me it too." And I thought that was important because it showed how, as non-white people and victims of racism, we, a lot of times the pressure of white supremacy has a way of making the victims become like the white supremacists in a way, by treating other non-white people like white people were treated. I just think it's interesting because we know how white people treat us, and we have to know, because if we're treating each other like white people treat us, we have to know that, okay, that we're getting this behavior from somewhere. It's not something that we just doing on our own. It's a learned behavior. And I had some. I also highlight. I think this will be my last comment. Let somebody else get on. On page 75, he said a lot of things can happen to a small ass nigga like you. You better watch yourself, boy. And I thought that it was interesting because the white man, or the racist man, said that he was a smart ass nigga, and you better watch yourself. And for the racist man to recognize that he was not a less intelligent person, I think that was important because he said that a lot of things can happen to people like you, and it stood out because it shows that, a lot of people may be intelligent. You got a lot of non-white people that are intelligent, but they don't want to show that intelligence because they don't want to, for fear that white people would, intimidate them or threaten them. And Mr. Williams was just so bold that, the racists could not help but notice that this man was, smart. And when you look at a lot of the things that he's going back to what I said earlier about what he was doing, for him to say, "Oh, I wanted to kill the enemy," and then for a racist man to say that he's a smart person, that should be an indicator right there of, okay, he's right. I mean, you should want to kill us because we're killing you. So it's just so much in that that can be brought out, and I just stop there and let somebody else come on.
Yes, can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'd like to start out saying that in Mr. Fuller's the United Independent Compensatory Code System Code Book, in the 10 stops, stop number 6, stop stealing. To steal from any person for any reason is to promote injustice. To steal, even to survive, is to promote injustice. I think that Richard was doing what he had to do, but I think that it had gotten to the point that his desire to get back at the Klan had interfered with his judgment. And I think that he was probably headed down the wrong road until he met Mr. Beaumont. Another point I'd like to bring up is when he was talking to Mr. Percy, at first he had sympathy for Mr. Percy for being a victim of a terroristic act when they cut his arm off. He said he felt pity and he cried uncontrollably. But almost at the blink of an eye, when Mr. Percy said he might have to turn him in, he didn't have much sympathy for Mr. Percy then. He told Mr. Percy, kill him and his whole family. That brings up an interesting point because in a system of white supremacy, non-white people, blacks, are often put in a position similar to Mr. Percy. If you're in a supervisor position or work leader or a night watchman, policeman, any of these so-called careers to where you are in service to the community and your job calls for you to turn in another non-white black person, you're faced with a dilemma. And it seems as though Mr. Percy did what he could do by giving you a heads up. Look, man, I'm going to have to turn you in if you don't stop. But Richard wouldn't take that, and he bluffed Mr. Percy, and I guess it worked. But he actually contradicted himself when he said that it disgusted him the way that blacks treat each other. And then he demonstrated anti-blackness, on Mr. Percy. So I'm kind of perplexed with that. I'm not sure if, necessity would breed that type of response. But like I say, he did what he had to do, and it worked for him. That part about the white man poisoning his neighbors knew, it brought up the fact of not helping white people. See, he started out helping the white man. Then the white man found out what he had and this and that. Jealousy came up. And he poisoned his mule. And he ended up taking everything that he had. They don't have any sympathetic response towards you. But the brainwashing of religion has warped our thinking to the point it's detrimental to us. He even pointed it out to Richard. But he was unaware of what actually caused his demise. I just think that it's something to make note of, that he understood the system to a certain point, but he did not understand what his mistake was. I'll mute my line.
Don't help white people. Any of the other folks on the line have things they wanted to share?
Yes, can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yes, when Mr. Beaumont was telling Mr. Williams how white supremacy done beat him down so much. It wasn't that he wasn't a man. He just said like white supremacy just took his manhood, and that kind of reminded me of what Mr. Neely Fuller talks about about how saying that you cannot be a man and be a victim of racism at the same time. And while Mr. Bowman, somebody correct me because I've done this for now, it's one of the two. But when he was talking about how, you know, you get beat down and sometimes you can't stand up to white supremacy and all that type of stuff, it kind of reminded me of, like, really was that sinking into Mr. Williams' head, or did it go in one ear and out the other? Because even though Mr. Bowman said that to him, he still looked at his father as a coward. Even though, you know, he explained to him how white supremacy, you can't be a man. You know, sometimes, you know, you just, you know, you have to take an L. That's what they call it, you know, taking an L. And I think everyone, if we honest, now I know I haven't took an L that drastic. You know, I don't even have children, but, you know, I don't know if I would take an L that drastic. But we have all taken L's when it comes to being victims of racism. You know, my L that I can attest to it would be, I remember when I was, probably 13 years old in the Boy Scouts. And I said, y'all, I was like, you know, use the N-word, you know, you didn't look at it as nothing like it's some racial. You just say, man, nigga, please, whatever, you know. It wasn't nothing. You know, you say that white people were niggas too. You see what I'm saying? Because, you know, it was just a slang. But I said, y'all niggas crazy. And I was the only black guy around at least, I say 24 to 25 white people at the Boy Scout summer camp. And when I stood up and said, probably like 3-4 years older than me, but he stood up and said, you're the nigga. And all the white people just looking at me, and now when I realized, I'm like, I'm the only black person sitting there. But at first I wasn't realizing that I was the only black person sitting there. You know, being naive as I was as a 13-year-old. You know what I'm saying? But like I said, sometimes we all have taken a loss. And, you know, just like that. And then, like I said, that was one of the most powerful statements I have heard in a long time was Mr. Beaumont said. And 9 times out of 10, I'm going to listen to this program again on the archives. I just want to go back over that again, what he said. I think that was very powerful. Even the timing, I would say, of nuclear. But I'll mute my line.
Any other comments folks want to get in? Anything else stuck out from this second segment?
I had another comment, though. Could I make that one?
I'll get it in. I just want to make sure I nab all the folks who haven't had an opportunity to share yet, but I got you, Noble.
Okay.
The person, anybody, I see other hands going up. Anybody hasn't shared yet on the line who hasn't made a comment yet, had something they wanted to share, lines. If your hand is up, your line should be open.
Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I just wanted to comment on the part where he was addressing the fact that he lost yet another best friend, Augustine Gardner. And it just really was heartbreaking just to understand how at such a young age he developed, you know, he kind of put his trust in, you know, befriending someone else under the harsh circumstances that they were living under, and yet another one of his friends died, and it was a tragic death. And at that time, he had no one to talk to. He just didn't know how to deal with it, and it was just really profound to me when he said to this day, he never took a chance on friendship again, and it really just, that part really stuck out to me. because it's really tragic, if you're dealing with death and just not understanding or processing it properly, and then having to put your own definition to it, where it affected him still to this day. So I just wanted to add that that really stuck out to me the most, and I'll mute my line.
Profound portion of the book as well. Anybody else had something they wanted to get in?
May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
This is one thing I've always been a bit confused about. And, they talk about where the KKK, they burn the crosses. They burn a cross in his yard. And they explained it as some kind of light in the darkness. But, I think they call themselves Christians, but they don't behave in a Christian way. And I started thinking that actually, the Bible describes Lucifer as being an angel of light. So I'm just wondering if maybe, it's kind of a play on words where they're not, because the things they do are clearly not in line with, what Christianity is. And so, but maybe this really aligned with being something more Luciferian. I don't know. And maybe it's tied in all those symbols and those uniforms that they wear. That was just a thought I had. But I really don't understand, why. Of all things to burn, if you're a Christian, why would you burn a cross?
I would definitely, my view would be satanic organization, terrorist cult, white supremacist cult organization. I think we kind of talked about some of that symbolism on the broadcast before. Let's see, I know Noble had a comment. Is anybody that has not shared? Did we miss anybody who had a hand up who has not got a comment in at all? Right on. Noel, if you wanted to get your other thought in.
Oh, yes, sir. Had a couple of short ones. Where he said on page 78, he said, Richard, the only way you're going to get some peace on this earth is to get right with God and make sure you leave Shreveport. You said you want a piece of the American pie. America ain't gave us nothing but hell, so don't think they going to give you a piece of anything. If you don't get a piece, it'll be spoiled rotten. And from my point of view, it seemed like Mr. Williams was right with God because he was engaged in the codified kind of warfare. And I just think that to be able to do that, you have to have a certain conviction and you have to have a certain connection to your inner source. If I can say that, because he was standing up for himself, and I don't think that, like he said, God wanted him to suffer like that. So I think that he was in tune with his source, where his conviction is, and doing what he felt that God would want him to do. So, and my last comment, where he said, Mr. Bowman, did you ever want to fight them back? He said, I wanted to fight back plenty of times, but I didn't. It wasn't because I was from Cal, either, just I wasn't a man no more. And he goes on to talk about how white folks, every time white folks did something to him. And I remember Dr. Umar Johnson said that whenever we encounter white folks or whenever we come across a white person, it's an act of military. It's a military tactic, or it's going to be some type of warfare that they're going to engage on. It's going to be some type of war or military interaction. And what basically what that means is whatever white folks say to us, it's just always going to be some type of act of racism, because the thing is just that their whole nature and where they're programming geared is just like it's on automatic. They're going to do something that's just disrespectful. They're going to do something that's toxic. They're going to do something that's rude. They can't help themselves. They got the I can't help it, and it's like when he said he wanted to fight back, but he didn't, is because his will was broken, and his will was broken because he had to deal with it on a daily basis. Even if he wanted to say, okay, well, today I'm going to fight back, but it's like white folks was doing something to him every day to just break him down. It's just like, now, white people do things on a daily basis to us because they know, okay, we did something to them today. Let's see if they're gonna do something back, and then it's like they say, okay, let's do something to make them not do anything back. So it's like this. Let's keep on hitting tennis balls at these people. Let's keep on sending these people obstacles so they can't fight back. Let's see how we can break these people will on a daily basis. And it's just something that I observe on a daily basis, how white people engage with us. That's all I had.
I just the whole portion of what we covered this week, I thought just really profound writing, which in my opinion is generally the case when you get people that are speaking honestly about what they've experienced, their views, their understanding of racism, white supremacy. That tends to be the case when people start being honest about what is happening with this war that white people are waging against black people. But that said, it took me a while to even grasp what was being stated when he started off talking about Mr. Percy, when he was trying to figure out why they cut his arm off. And he says, them old hunters wouldn't feed their dogs for 10, 11, or 12 days. Then they would run them and work them real hard. By then, they'd be starving. So the white men made a game out of finding Negroes and cutting off parts of their bodies and feeding them to the dogs. It took me a long time to sleep digesting that. Like, wow. Like when Mr. Nero, when he says white people kill for fun, we will starve the dog, which is supposed to be our best friend that we love. We will starve the dog so that they will be ravenous. And then we'll just go find a random black person and mutilate them. And whatever we cut off from that black person, feed it to the dog. I mean, wow. White pathology. And then sticking with Mr. Percy, when he threatens him about, you're not gonna snitch on me, basically. I will stick it to you, whatever. I think when people were talking about the anti-blackness, and it seemed like Mr. Williams had some level of compassion for Mr. Percy not having his arm and what have you, at least at the beginning. But that vanished. I thought it was very telling when he said, I held that same ice pick at Mr. Percy's throat till he swore he would never tell the white man what I was doing. I was angry with Mr. Percy because he personified the typical Negro. Maybe I saw some of myself in him and I couldn't bear it. It killed me that he was so goddamn eager to turn me in. Just that sentence about him maybe seeing some of himself in Mr. Percy. I mean, again, when we start being honest, I say that all the time. If Mr. Percy is typical, because that's what he said, he personified the typical Negro. That is, in my view, that is what racism, white supremacy produces. And I thought he did a great job explaining that, how they would be rewarded. White people would give them, a few crumbs if they would rat on other black people. You go snitch and give me the information that I want on other black people, and, I'll hook you up. I'll give you a few nickels or what have you. That has been conditioned for centuries. And that is what should be expected. It shouldn't be something where we are stunned that this sort of anti-blackness, that we have this lack of compassion and empathy for other black people. We should understand that is what the system of white supremacy necessitates. It is crucial to the maintenance of this system. And I think frequently when we get angry, when we talking about Uncle Tom this and Coon that and House Nigga this, that we might be seeing some of ourselves in whomever it is that we are attacking and chiding for their response to racism, white supremacy. I just thought that was real important, and honesty. I'm digging it. Yeah, also I thought that passage as well that the female caller pointed out about how he said to this day he didn't take any more friends. We got 3 childhood friends, important too. These are children, 3 childhood friends, and all of them die in a very heinous manner at the hands of white terrorists. And with the most recent one, with Augustine, I thought it reminded me of one of our earlier white guests, I believe Mr. Timothy Parrish, because he grew up in Louisiana as well. And his book opens with swimming. I said that is huge. Like, so many battles were waged around swimming pools and access to public swimming pools, and black people dying around trying to get access to a swimming pool in the summertime. But he starts his book off in Louisiana, where I think it's like 1950s, 1960s, black people are trying to get access to a swimming pool in Louisiana, and a white person bombs the pool, destroys it. They have to close it down, and felt that was just. Where he talks about the white people, he says he went and saw the ruins after the bomb was ignited. It didn't kill anybody, but that they thought this was the correct thing to do, that they would prefer to bomb the pool and nobody have any place to swim, as opposed to having black people coming and swimming with white people at this pool. Just that the perils of swimming, that is worth a whole program if folks are interested in studying. I mean, there have been war. I mean, literally, racism, white supremacy is war, and there have been many battles just around access to swimming pools for black people, and even many instances of black people dying because they were out, as what they were talking about, going and swimming in different rivers and creeks. They didn't have lifeguards there to protect you if something happened, and black people dying going out and swimming in these kind of dangerous areas because they didn't have access to a swimming pool, a safe swimming facility in the summertime. With that, we did our 3 hours. Again, next week we'll be picking up on chapter 10. Unless somebody had a final quick sentence that they wanted to get in before we conclude.
I would like to say finally that the portion when he spoke about, he thought that his family was the poorest until he went over to his friend's house and saw how he was living. It brings up the point that this was happening all over the United States during that time period, where blacks were forced into extreme poverty, and they were even run out of areas. They had different towns called sundown town, where you couldn't even they would put up signs, don't let the sun go down on you, nigger. And they would even burn people out and run thousands of blacks from counties, and then so they sort of herd you into these environments, poverty-stricken environments, and then it affected you in every way, being in those type environments, educational, employment, every area that you can think of. It devastated the non-white black people. And I just wanted to make that point that, that it wasn't that uncommon, that poverty that he was experiencing. It was experienced by thousands upon thousands all over the United States. I mute my line.
Absolutely. And just to that point, that's another one I think can help with that anti-blackness. I think frequently a lot of us fall into a pattern of thinking that we are suffering the most, or nobody, is suffering the way that we are. And one of our guests had said that before. I thought that was one of the more important points that has been made. They said if you can kind of pull back and realize that this is happening to millions of black people around the globe, millions, billions of non-white people, that this is not just about you in terms of black people being terrorized, that can help you to manage this, and hopefully to have a little bit more patience, a little bit more empathy with other black people, which I definitely think would be a fantastic benefit to all of us. Not a coincidence, but I just, like hours ago, got the audiobook for Sundown Towns. James Lowen, he is a racist suspect, but that book, I think, has a lot of information on what Mr. Demery just said. I was thinking that might be an upcoming audiobook or one of our book study sessions. James Lowen, Sundown Towns. I got the ebook and the audiobook, unabridged. And one of our guests for next week, the white female who wrote The Wheat Money, she said, she references Sundown Towns in that book, and she said she was doing an interview with a black male in Alabama. He told her that, like, 2000s, not 1940, 1930, 1950, like 2000s, he was driving a taxi cab, and that he was still seeing signs that said, if you're a black person, you're not supposed to be here after sundown. In the 2000s, that he was still seeing these signs. So, system of white supremacy, the war against black people continues. We will be back.
Can I say something? Coleman, Alabama is one of those towns, and last time I checked, I think in 2007, they still had signs up like that. I haven't been through that recently. I know about it I have. But yeah, Coleman, Alabama is one of those towns.
I'm not surprised. I am not surprised. We will ride. I'm not sure if folks caught it. Hopefully I got it was clear. I think some of Mr. Beaumont's story, I think some of the folks might have been thinking that was Mr. Williams. It was Mr. Beaumont, not Mr. Williams, who was unfortunately helping his white neighbor and looking out for him. And then the white neighbor turns around and starts calling him a nigger Texan. That was not Mr. Williams. That was Mr. Beaumont. And I think that was also Mr. Beaumont that got accused of being a smart nigger towards the end. They said they were going to make trouble. That was not Mr. Williams. That was Mr. Beaumont recounting his trials and tribulations. At any rate, we will be back tomorrow for the compensatory call-in, kind of catch up on what has gone down over the past 7 days, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, and then we will be rolling right on through the end of September. Monday, we should have Debbie Irving, racist suspect, white woman, on the program. Tuesday, we should have Christy Tyler. She's the white woman who wrote The Wheat Money. Cowbell right there as well. Thursday, we should have Dr. Charles Todd. He is the black male that Dr. Curry mentioned who did his dissertation on these. I thought these were older white people. These are young white people, 20s white people who are buying guns and organizing to kill black people. This is what he did his dissertation on. He went out and interviewed these folks to talk with them about, why they're doing this and what problems they have with black people. But he'll be here next Thursday. So we should be very active for the next week or so, going down this home stretch into September. Anywho, if you have any questions, problems, confusion, feel free. Drop me an email, let me know, or Twitter. Either one works. And we will be back next week picking up on Chapter 10 from Mr. Williams' book next Friday. Thank you. Appreciate all the folks who had input. Hope people are enjoying the book as much as I am. Looks like this one might be threatening to break Gus's top 10. It is outstanding thus far. I'm looking forward to reading more. With that, everyone be safe. It's not a good time to start drinking behind the wheel. If you're going to consume any alcohol, any intoxicants, get to one spot and stay there. You do not want to put yourself in a position where you're having to do some explaining or communicating with racist enforcement officials, particularly late at night behind the wheel of a vehicle. I mean, that is just asking for all kinds of problems, confusion, chaos. Sobriety would be best. But if you are going to drink, get to one spot, stay there, and that way you can leave sober in the morning and hopefully have a much better shot under the system of white supremacy. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and we will be back in about 24 hours. Creator, help us remain patient with other victims of racism. Help us remain patient with ourselves. Help us display maximum black self-respect at all times, in all places, in all areas of people activity. allow our black self-respect to shine brightest with those black people we have difficulty being patient and empathetic with. Allow our ancestors to help us become solutions to the problem. Racist man, racist woman, racist child. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice as soon as possible. Context of White Supremacy signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.